In summation, what I think would be the best ever sustainable thing that you could buy is, hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing very well. I finally figured out the HDR setting on my camera and the ring light is on full blast, so I really hope the quality of this video looks a lot better. I just want to break down like what is the most sustainable option that you could possibly buy next to not buying anything else. I've said it time and time again, it's like you vote with your dollar. It's so important to be like a mindful consumer, and if like let's say you're just in need of something but you want to do it responsibly, you want to do your research, you would just want to know what's what in terms of like sustainable fashion, because let's face it, a lot of brands are out there greenwashing and they're giving you all of these claims without backing it up with any evidence or hard data. So I'm here to just kind of break it down like really quickly and simply of like what to look for when you're replenishing your wardrobe with sustainable options. It doesn't even have to be like you're trying to build an entirely sustainable capsule wardrobe, but when you do buy new pieces, if/when you want them to be the best option for yourself, but also for the planet. I'm gonna rank these from the worst to the best, so stick around to the end to find out what is the best option in terms of sustainable fashion. We're gonna start with synthetic fibers, synthetic materials, and what that really means. So synthetic is anything that is man-made. It doesn't grow from the earth, and I think you know what I'm talking about. It's basically petroleum product, and petroleum covers like a broad umbrella. It includes crude oil, it includes plastics, it includes like a lot of other little things. It's kind of like a square can be a rectangle, but a rectangle can't be a square. Crude oil can be petroleum, but petroleum can't be crude oil. I hope I didn't lose you there. But essentially anything that is a synthetic material has been previously like drilled for. And when I mean drilled for, it's exactly what it sounds like. When you drill for oil, somewhere that has oil, and extracting it and then shipping it to a manufacturing processing, chemical processing plant and obtaining these synthetic fibers. That's like a very rough overview of the manufacturing process, but essentially it's something that is drilled for and then has to be manufactured. Now we know fossil fuels are the #1 contributor to the climate crisis in terms of CO2 emissions. When you have any 100% polyester, acrylic, nylon, whatever kind of top, it's basically made in the same way that drilling for oil is. Thumbs down. It's just driving up demand for fossil fuels because the demand for these synthetic fibers is so high because it is a relatively cheap option in terms of manufacturing. That's why it's so widespread, is because it's so scalable. Fossil fuels in the oil industry has already been in place for so long, and then the rise of fast fashion coming after it, they're just kind of feeding into each other. Synthetic fibers are bad for a lot of reasons, not just the way that they are manufactured, that's probably the biggest one, but also they shed microplastics unless you have like a sort of laundry catch bag. They shed microplastics every time you wear them, every time you wash them especially, and there's no controlling that shedding, and those microplastics obviously end up in our waterways, which then go through the water cycle, and then we drink said microplastics. It's something like you drink like a credit card's worth of microplastic, like I think it's a month or a year. Either way, way too much for me, way too much. And obviously having so much microplastic in your body is leading to all sorts of health detriments that we don't have enough time to get into today. But #1, that is bad. #2, these synthetic materials and fibers last for hundreds of years before they ever biodegrade. And even after they biodegrade, they're leaving behind toxic waste. That is waste that, you know, animals, organisms, the bacteria can't consume in a safe manner. In summation, synthetic fibers are a wasteful manufacturing process and contribute a lot of CO2. They shed microplastics, which then end up inside of us, which is like scary, and they also never biodegrade or compost safely. Those are the big three of why they are awful. The only time I would maybe say synthetic materials get like a pass is when you're thinking of like making something extremely durable. Nylon, for example, is an extremely durable fiber, but again, I do think the cons outweigh the pros even in the conversation of durability. Next up, we have blends. Now blends are 60% polyester, 40% cotton. I hate to break it to you, but blends truly are only like a tiny, tiny step above synthetic fibers because they still contain synthetic fibers. Most of the time, they're mostly synthetic fibers in these blends. I think you can claim like 1% of cotton and 99% polyester and still claim that it's a cotton blend. Unfortunately, the regulation is like not that strict to make it like it has to be 50% plus. With that, you still have all of the negative things about synthetic fibers. It's just like, okay, if you have 60% poly and 40% cotton, 40% of that item is going to biodegrade, but it's still going to be contaminated with the polyester that it was also woven with, still going to be leaving behind toxic waste. So still boom. Recycled synthetic fibers, I put them above blends because you don't really need to manufacture as much for the virgin materials that you do for the synthetic and the man-made. At least these things kind of already exist in the ecosystem. They do still have all of the cons of synthetic fibers that I previously mentioned, but it is worth noting if we can continue to keep these synthetic fibers, these man-made plastics out of landfill for as long as possible, it does help keeping toxic waste and microplastics out of our waterways and our environment, and like we need to be doing that as much as possible. Still though, it is synthetic. We just have to cut back the demand for all of this. Not to mention our sorting capabilities are not like that great yet. So when people say they want to recycle polyester or nylon, acrylic, whatever, like that's great, but what is the accuracy behind that? It's still very, very new. People are definitely doing it. Like there's a lot of new innovative like sciences and researches and labs that are accomplishing this, but it hasn't been like on a wide scale yet. I know Shein recently said that they're, I can't even believe I just said that name out loud, but they recently have like this new initiative to do just that and like recycle polyester. Still, it is not a good fiber and I'm not ranking it very high. Like I still want to rank it very low, but at least like it doesn't have the manufacturing energy that it takes to make those virgin materials in the first place. Next up, we have man-made natural fibers. Now, these are things like lyocell, tencel, those sorts of things that are manufactured, but they're from natural fibers. So there is like a lot of manufacturing that does go into weaving these yarns and weaving these knits and everything to then, you know, cut and sew into garments, but at least it will eventually biodegrade and decompose without leaving behind toxic waste. With that being said, it still takes a really long time for a t-shirt that's wedged between millions of other t-shirts to decompose. So again, it goes back to still reducing the demand for these things, even though it on paper is compostable. But I do rank these pretty highly because they're natural materials that are kind of replacing the function of those synthetic fibers, and hopefully we just like never will touch and use them again. Like that is the main goal. To no surprise, we have just natural fibers up next. They're not man-made, so they don't take as much manufacturing, but it is worth noting that it does take resources such as land and water and just general agriculture needs to grow things such as hemp, cotton, bamboo, linen. If you're using kind of like animal byproduct like silk, wool, cashmere, those sorts of things like that, obviously you have to feed your lambs and everything like that and keep them going and growing and healthy. So that takes also like resources before manufacturing even takes place. So it's not exactly like the most sustainable option ever in the world, but it is going to decompose and it is not full of toxic, harmful chemicals that you then put on your body and shed while you're literally just like living life and walking around. So that is why I do rate these pretty high on the full spectrum. It's actually kind of crazy how like we don't have like that many good safe options of clothing to put on nowadays. Like if you were to go back to the 50s or even maybe like the 70s, I feel like a lot of clothing was just like natural. It wasn't even like it wasn't a question, you know, but because of economies of scale and just like the sheer demand for like cheap fast clothing, like we're literally wearing like oil and plastic. Like it's gross. It is not good. I'm gonna get off my soapbox and move to the last and best sustainable fiber, which you probably saw this coming earlier, but it is recycled natural fibers. So anytime you can get like a recycled wool, recycled cotton, those are going to be your best options, and that is because you take less resources in terms of planting, growing, feeding, taking care of like a farm, taking care of a plot of land, taking care of a crop, and you're instead using that to kind of sort your recycling and manufacture and respin the yarn for the fabric yardage. So that is what I'm going to rate at the very top of the list. Now, we talked about fibers, but next I want to talk to you about location, which is something that you might not have ever really considered before. So I'm going to give you 3 scenarios. Let's say that you live in North Carolina. Your first one is buying something overseas. Doesn't matter where. It could be like UK, China, India, doesn't matter. Your next option is buying from California. Your third option is buying something from New York. Out of those 3 options, what do you think is the most sustainable? If you guessed buying from New York, you would be correct. And that is simply because you just take less resources, as in oil, labor, material, like packaging, to get it to you. Honestly, it's really just a proximity thing. So New York shipping to North Carolina is going to take a lot less than maybe overnighting something on a plane from California, and especially shipping it from, let's say, India, like also overnighting it and then also getting out on ground shipping and just getting it on a truck. Versus in New York, you most likely will just get that thing on a truck and get it to you. The best option though is to go to like a local shop or store or artisan and like buying directly from them. Things that are like handmade, things that you find at like a flea market. If it's not like crazily outsourced and like bought from like all over the world, like that's great. I understand it's not something you might have ever thought, because in this day and age, like you buy something from like the UK, it gets to you in like the next 3 to 5 business days. Like it is actually insane. When I bought from that brand Naked, like it got to me insanely quickly, and it was coming from like Switzerland or something, or like Sweden. I genuinely was shocked that it arrived that quickly. That just shows you like how much they're willing to spend on shipping. And most of the time it's a lot, because people do expect with like the Amazon era things to get to you in 2 business days. So definitely need to consider location when you're shopping. Local is always better. Like you're supporting your local communities, you're supporting people in your area, you're making sure that jobs aren't like outsourced overseas or wherever. Local artists, markets, shops, boutiques, like those are your best bet to avoid like all the extra CO2 emissions that like occur during the shipping process. We have new versus upcycled versus used. It's pretty predictable where I fall on the scale of new versus upcycled versus used, like secondhand. Anything new, you've heard me say it before, it takes a lot of manufacturing just to get even like that one new item. Something that's upcycled, you first have to take like a bunch of old items, deteriorate them, and then respin like their yarn, or just like, you know, break them down to like bedding and carpeting and all that good stuff, insulation, like they could be used for that. It's still a lot of manufacturing versus something that like I wanted to sell this t-shirt and someone bought this t-shirt from me. This took no new manufacturing processes. It took no additional labor, and that is why in my eyes like it is ranked the best. And that is why like I will forever ever love thrifting. I think one of my best thrift finds in terms of sustainability was a 100% wool H&M sweater in like my local Goodwill thrift. And yes, it was H&M, so it was mass produced. If it was like a secondhand like locally knitted 100% wool sweater, like that would be my best ever thrift find. But in terms of sustainability, like it's natural fibers, so whenever it does shed, when it does shed, it's not going to harm my internal organs later. In summation, what I think would be the best ever sustainable thing that you could buy is made of natural fibers locally at your Goodwill or whatever thrift store. It checks all the boxes in terms of not outsourcing or using a lot of energy or shipping, and basically just keeping CO2 emissions down, keeping land use down, keeping resources down like water, agriculture, land. And that's really what it is at the end of the day, is like we're literally overwhelmed with just junk. Like we are taking out fossil fuels to make junk, and it's harming us and it's harming the planet at like an irreparable rate. I'm not here to scare you and like make you freak out, but I'm just here to make you maybe think differently about your consumption habits and kind of break down like what really is sustainable. If you're buying like new product, is that the most sustainable thing that you could be doing? 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. But if it's something that's like extremely durable, you're never gonna get rid of it, then yeah, like maybe buying something new could suit you, but just do it mindfully. Like I've given you the breakdown. It's up to you to do what you will with that information. Thanks for letting me babble about environmental science and fashion. It's literally like my favorite intersection of topics ever because I studied both of those things and I'm just really passionate about it. So if you want to see more content like this, leave me a suggestion down below, like that would be really cool. But also subscribe. I don't know what that pause was, but also subscribe so you can see when I put out new videos. I do usually every Sunday. There's also a sustainable style and conscious fashion playlist that I have that will be at the end of this video, so you should stick around and check that out. The algorithm is also going to recommend you a video specific for you. You should definitely see what that is, and like, comment, subscribe, do all the good things. I will catch you guys in next Sunday's video. Until next time, don't forget to be kind to yourself, others, and the planet. Bye.